Hello there, sports fans. Welcome back to the Significant Coaching Podcast. I'm Matt Rogers, and I've got a really great treat for you today. I've got a young coach who's doing dynamic things down at the University of Ozarks. He's the head wrestling coach there. His name is Vinny Barber. He just led his team to the conference championship, the St. Louis Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Championship. Great league. And he's only been in the gig for 2 years. And he just won his first conference championship. He's coaching right now as I'm talking in the national tournament. His team is advanced to the regionals. And man, I love his energy. And the reason I wanted to have Vinny on, this goes back 25 years for me, more than 25 years, almost 27, 28 years. My first job out of college was at St. Ambrose University in Davenport, Iowa. And I knew I wanted to coach, but I took a job as a residence hall director. So I ran, four or five buildings at St. Ambrose. I was responsible for like 700 collegians and men and women, had a huge staff, and was responsible for the day in and day out health of these young college students. But I knew I wanted to coach. So my first week on campus at St. Ambrose, I walked over to the athletic building, walked into the men's basketball coach's office, and I asked Ray Shovlin, Hall of Fame coach Ray Shovlin, one of the best men you'll ever meet, one of the best coaches you'll ever watch coach. I asked Ray if he'd be open to having me on staff. And Ray, in his gravelly voice, said, "Yeah, we'll take you." And it changed my life, because Ray let me learn how to coach underneath him, let me coach the JV team with some of the best men I've ever been around, taught me how to lead, taught me how to treat officials, taught me how to take care of young college men. And I'm so thankful for that. So whenever I run into somebody who's a coach, a young coach, and I see their spirit, I see their energy and their glow, I want to promote them. I want to assist them. I want to be their friend. Anything they need, I want to be there for them. And I got to meet Vinny, Coach Barber, this past summer when I was doing some consulting down at the University of Ozarks. Their AD and president brought me in to work with the athletic coaches and the staff and help them develop some things that they really wanted to get better at, including recruiting. And I love the whole staff. It's a great team of coaches. Enjoyed every second I got to be with them. But Vinny really stood out to me. He was so passionate, still is, so energized. And I was so thankful, and I'm always thankful when I run into somebody who's dedicated their life to making the lives of others better. And that is Vinny Barber to a T. So really thankful that he agreed to be on. We had a great conversation. You'll hear his passion for teaching, for coaching, for wrestling, for life in our talk. But I was and still am very impressed with this young guy and what he's going to do with his career. He is a shining star in the world of coaching, shining star in the world of wrestling. And I think you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, here is the wonderful Coach Vinny Barber from the University of Ozarks. Coach Barber, so great to see you, and just so thrilled to see your team competing at nationals and competing in the regionals this week, conference champ. How does this season feel?
It's great. So this year was tough. This year was probably my hardest year in coaching. We had, a lot of obstacles I was learning as a young coach, but our guys really banded together well and won a conference championship. That was the first in our program history. We actually just hit a decade this year. I just realized we're a decade-old program. So to check that one off the list after many years coming in second has been really cool. But more importantly, like, our guys needed that. Our kids needed that after this year. It was really a trying year in a lot of ways, and for them to band together and win that at the end, and now heading into regionals, but to win a conference championship was huge for our program and our kids.
Well, it says a lot about you and your staff and getting them through a hard year and still leading them to the championship.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your guys are competing at their highest level? Do you feel like you guys are starting to peak?
Yeah, I think we do a good job of that here. I think just training wise, we do a really good job of that. We usually peak well towards the end of the year, but I think our guys, like, it's really inspiring when you can tell the guys really love and care about each other, and that all starting to happen a lot, and they inspire each other and get each other through the hard days, and I think that's really coming together the second semester really well.
It's so important for me. I'm coaching a high school team right now, and I didn't do a very good job of building culture. We had so many multi-sport athletes. Half the team I didn't see until tryouts. What are you doing culture wise at the college level to build that culture you want, build that brotherhood and sisterhood? Talk
Yeah.
talk, talk us through a little bit of that.
So I've been, this is my 7th year here, and it's funny because this year is probably my first year that I noticed how important it is to focus on culture every year. And we had a class that probably didn't fit the culture we needed come in this year, and I didn't realize how much of an impact that could have and how fast it could have an impact. I think it's just being really attentive to your culture. Right. I think, I thought we were in a different spot, and I could take a step back and let the kids kind of lead it a little bit and let our leaders step up and lead. But I learned this year, and it's a great year to do it, and a great lesson is that we need to be present all the time and pushing our culture, and pushing what we want and what we want from our kids, and empowering the ones that are doing the right things, and teaching them how to empower others. One thing I used to do, when we selected captains, I always picked like a leadership book, and at like something in athletics, and I bought them a copy. They would read it, and we would meet probably every 2 weeks and talk about stuff like that and meet as a group. I took a back seat to that this year, and I realized that probably not going to do that one again. They need to be taught how to lead. But a lot of it is just constant reminders from coaches and their leaders on things. I think we're trying to find that fine balance between giving our kids like some autonomy to be high level athletes at the college level, and also understanding that they're still 18 to 22 years old.
Right.
So that has been, I'm learning that this year, but I think it's just a constant, you just got to constantly remind yourself of what your culture is, right? And constantly remind your kids and hold true to those and believe them. Right. I think one thing I'm learning too is even during the recruiting process, I don't know, I would see some kids that I really wanted, and I think they didn't fit the culture 100%. And but their results were higher than what I would usually get, or they were a higher level recruit, and I would kind of bend a little bit. And then I'm learning really quick, like, hey, that doesn't matter. And it's really got to be important to fit the culture. My job's to make them good at wrestling, right? They got to fit the culture, and being upfront in the recruiting process is super important now, what we're about, because we're not for everybody, right? The way we run our program is not for everybody. And when you try to fit like a square peg in a round hole and hope that it works, it never does, right? So I think just being really attentive to it, and constant reminders of our guys and to our guys and our girls of like, hey, this is our culture, this is what we want, this is what we expect, and not really wavering on that, right? Like, no, there's not really much gray area. Like, we want guys who come in and work really hard, love college wrestling, go to class, do the right things, spend a lot of time doing community service, and understanding that like it's not just all about wrestling, and hammering that stuff home all the time is really important.
Yeah, it's so great you're talking about this, because I think a lot of coaches, you see that shiny golden athlete and you're like, oh, that kid could win us a national championship.
Yeah.
And you get a little tunnel vision because it's so rare to find that kid that can be a difference maker on the mat.
Yeah.
And you really have to take the time to dive in a little bit more and ask yourself, how's that transition going to be into our program? What are the effects of that kid in our league? I was really honored to spend some time with you and the other coaches this summer, and just really impressed with the quality of coaching and people at Ozarks. And obviously you and I hit it off, and I just really love your energy and your commitment to your kids. Even while I was there, you had kids coming in and out of your office all day long.
Yeah.
And not for really a purpose outside of, they just wanted to be close to you. They just want to
Yeah.
talk to you. They wanted to share
Yeah.
their life with you.
Yeah, that's important to us. Like
Yeah.
that's big for us. It's funny. I actually moved offices since you've been in there to like a bigger office, got
Yeah.
more chairs and more seating area because that's important. Like I got to be there for them when it's not 4 to 6 in practice, right? Like that's,
Right.
and I think that's what makes our program good, and that's what helped us become more successful.
Yeah. And it's such an impressive thing that you're doing, because it's obvious it doesn't take those kids long to understand they've got you in that role, that you have an open door policy and
Yeah.
some. How much are you developing your assistant coaches in that role too, and helps in terms of helping build that culture? What role do they play?
Well, I think that's super important. It's a funny one that you bring that up because my time as an assistant, our old head coach actually did a really good job of this, and I actually take the same thing. We start step one in recruiting too. You know, there's some kids who we're pretty high up on, and I lean on my assistants, and they do a great job of doing a lot of the recruiting. And sometimes, on the rare occasion, we'll get a kid that says, "I want to talk to the head coach." And I'm like, all right, well, that's probably never coming because if you don't respect my assistants the same way you respect me, then it's not going to work. So one thing I really like, and as an assistant, our old head coach was like this, and I try to be the same way, is I think from an HR standpoint, we got to call people assistants and head coaches, but I treat them the same. I let them make the same autonomy and same choices. Their offices are just as busy as mine with the guys. They have great relationships with them. It's really important that they are respected the same way. And I think some coaches and some programs, they kind of use their assistants as tools rather than people, right? And I gotta, just like I respect our athletes as people first and wrestlers, like I respect my assistants as people first, and then coaches with me, and we do everything together, right? And I don't know if that's sometimes because I'm not like, I never want to be the one that own the answer at the end of the day, right? I always ask them, and sometimes because it's scary to be the last guy with the answer. But everything we do is together, and our kids see that. We're really transparent with that with our kids, and it's when there's an issue, there's some things I have to handle, right? But our assistants are always in the room, right? Our assistants are always in the room. They're always there. They're always with the guys, and the guys respect them. And it's nice too, because it's interesting, when I was an assistant, the kids used to come to me with everything.
Right.
Now as a head coach, they come to me with nothing, right? And
Right.
they come to the assistant. So I understand actually how important that is, to use that relationship and value the relationship that the assistants have with our kids, because they're the first line of defense in anything going down. And then our kids really respect our assistants. And it really just comes down to the fact that I trust them to run the program. And you can't have an assistant that you can't trust. And they treat the program like it's theirs, right? I try to empower them as as like soon to be head coaches somewhere, right? And I think we do a good job of that. And I'm really happy with the relationships they have with the guys too.
Fantastic. I want to dive into recruiting here in a little bit.
Yeah.
I really love what you're doing and how you're doing it. But I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you're coaching both men and women.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the joys of that, the challenges of that, and maybe some of the things you've learned about building that women's program, and having to balance both
Yeah.
of those teams, and the difference in having to how you coach both of those teams.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big year for me doing both this year. I think some things in your coaching career you get humbled on pretty quick, because I was very confident that I could do both. I was very confident that I could do both and be really successful at both. And that confidence hasn't wavered. I think we can, but I learned really quickly that it's not plug and play. Right. I thought all the things I did on the guys' side since I've been here are pretty plug and play over to the women's side, and that was not the case. And I think with for many reasons, right? The coaching men versus women is very different. Men's wrestling to women's wrestling is two different styles. Women's wrestling is still a very emerging sport, so it requires a little bit more TLC on the front end. And so it wasn't plug and play. And I think one thing I learned is that, and the challenges we had this year was trying to balance both and support both equally the way they needed to. And that was something that, we learned and tried to pivot throughout the year and make happen. But on the women's side, I mean, that's been rewarding. I tell you, it's one reason why I really wanted to coach the women's wrestling was it was going to make me a much better coach, because I think on the guys' side of college athletics, we get away with a lot, right? We get away with, sometimes communication doesn't have to be awesome. It's like a rough and tough way of coaching sometimes, where coaching the women, they're much more open to communicate. They hold you much more accountable. They know what they want. They're more emotionally mature at that age. I think women at the college age are more emotionally mature. And you really got to be on your A game. And I respect that. And, it's multiple times throughout the year where like I do something on the guy's side and try to do it on the girl's side. And they'd be like, hey, coach, that's not right. I'm like, okay, you're right. And so it was really rewarding in that way and using this year to learn how to become a better coach for both. But it's been really hard to balance. I think that's the hardest thing is balancing them both because in men's and women's wrestling right now, we're just starting, with them emerging as an NCAA sport here in 2025. I want to give them the fair share of my time and what we do. And it's hard because, I don't want to be, sometimes they used to run tournaments together and coaching and trying to be in the women's gym and the men's gym at the same time is really hard. Going recruiting, right? There's only so many recruiting weekends in a year. Where do I go to focus on the women versus the guys? And that's been tough. That's been tough. And that's something, I think we're changing up the structure of how we do some things next year, staffing wise, to allow that, you can't share roles. I think that's something we learned. You can't share roles. And that's something we're changing come next season to make the girls feel like they get just as much respect from us as the guys team did this year.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. And you might have the toughest job in the country, because you look at track and field, it's all on one track. The girls are running, the boys are running.
Yep.
There's
it's all the same sport.
It's all the same sport, and it's easy. Volleyball, you've got the fall for the women, and you've got the men in the spring.
Yep.
There's a divide. You can give your full attention.
Yeah.
Wrestling, you're in it. And
yeah, I mean, we were practicing at like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. with the girls in the morning, and then practicing at 4 to 6 p.m. at night. And like, I know I don't talk about this one all that much because I feel like this is my problem to own, right? But as people, right? Like, as people and my assistants, like we were so tired come second semester, the beginning of second semester, just being like, wow, right? We're in the office 12 hours a day. We're recruiting 2 sets of athletes. We're managing our current athletes, trying to give them the time. And, like the work-life balance of that becomes really, really hard as well. And I don't speak on that very often. I don't know why, but that's been probably the biggest thing is time for us as people and coaches to recharge. Right. And I think that not for me personally, but for our kids, you're right. When I'm coming in on Thursday and I'm pretty tired and my assistants are pretty dragged out, the kids feel that, right? We're the main source of energy for our kids and our programs.
Right.
And if we're drained, that becomes hard. And those things, and that's made it really hard. I think a lot of people and a lot of universities across the country look at men's and women's wrestling the same way they look at men's and women's swimming.
Yeah.
The way they look at all the sports that hold 2 genders, right? We just can't. We're 2 different sports, right? 2 different sports, 2 different rule sets, 2 different needs, and that's just been challenging. And then, we're working through it. I think next year we'll have a much better plan to fix that.
You and I talked a lot in this last summer about finding that balance for you. And getting on your boat and getting out and throwing the rod and catching some fish. And I know in the middle of the season, it's hard to do those things and to find your center. Are you finding that you're working towards some of that? Are you finding that chance to breathe? Are you giving yourself that opportunity?
Well, I had to because I think, I'm still a very young coach, but, we went to a tournament this year and a coach that I look up to was having a seating meeting. And he says, hey, if anyone needs a shoulder to cry on, like call me. Cause I was about to get out of coaching after 20 some odd years. And I've wavered that this year. And when I heard him say that, I was like, oh, I look up to Jim, right? I think he's a phenomenal coach and he does great things. And to hear him humanized everybody in that room, be like, oh, we all feel that, right? And there was a hairy stretch of time here where I was like, whoa, I don't know. And I love coaching. I love what I do. But I had to find time for myself because I was starting to get to a point where I didn't, right? And I know how much I love it. And I asked the recruits, right? Do you love wrestling when you hate it, right? Because you got to, because it gets hard. And I ask myself that every day. Do I love coaching when I hate it? Because there's times we hate coaching, right? Yes. And it's very hard. But you got to remember the days you love it. And when I was having a hard time digging deep into my memories about the days I loved it, I was like, whoa, something's up here, right? And I knew that wasn't true, right? I knew it was more of a of that time in my life where I was like, oh, this is hard, and I'm feeling sorry for myself. And for the reasons of what you're mentioning, is like I wasn't making time for myself. I didn't have a good work-life balance. I was so bought into the programs, and that's not a bad thing, but it's bad when that's all you do.
Right.
So I had to find that time for myself. And I think this, coming out of it, and also too, it's like when you start to find that time for yourself, you start to remember again. And I was lucky during COVID, I had a taste of this, is like, college coaching is really important, but wrestling's not that important, right? Like it is to me, but there's so many other things in life, and finding the time for myself and valuing things that I care about in my life that are outside of the wrestling room has allowed me to value the things that my kids care about outside the wrestling room. And so it's only strengthened our bonds with our kids, because then it takes you away from just being a wrestling coach all the time. Right. And that's where I was stuck at. I was stuck in that rut for quite some time, just being a wrestling coach, and not remembering there's other things outside of life. And then I would almost try to fit my kids into that box. And so I had to. I think I've done a better job with that. And it was a choice, decide to put your head down and grind out coaching until you just give up, or like step away from it for a second after 6 o'clock at night. Maybe turn your phone off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know I told you this back in the summer, but I'll tell you again, you got me whenever you need me. And you can always call me and just say, Matt, I just need you to shut up and listen. And and I need those people, I've got to have that. And I forget that sometimes, and how important that is. So you're such a bright star in our coaching world, in our coaching universe, that it would hurt my heart that if you ever walked away from this thing that you're so good at. So
appreciate it. Well, I think it's like noticing that is big, right? Like I noticed it. I there was a day when I woke up and I was like, I don't want to go in today. And I was like, oh, I've never felt that before. And I was like, that's just, something's up, right? So, but I'm sure everyone's been there, right? I think to me, it was kind of like a badge of honor in a way, as sick as that sounds. I was like, hey, I now I understand when everyone's like, oh, you'll feel this one day.
You will. There's no escaping it. You're seeing these great coaches across the country in every sports. They're all going through that, where there's just they hit that wall and they're like, I'm not getting through to my kids, or we're not hitting what we need to hit this week. We're not reaching our potential. And you dump that back on yourself. And at the end of the day, these kids they're going to go through lulls, no matter how talented they are. They're going to doubt themselves. They're going to have insecurities. They're going to wonder, do they still want to do this? And it's just inevitable that you're going to go through that as a coach. So what a great year you've had with what you've gone through. And for you to be able to say, I can do this and have this year every year, if we continue to remember that we're human beings, and we need that time, and we need that love, and we need that patience, you're going to be great. Let's talk recruiting, because tell me some of the things, because you had to really recreate your recruiting structure, having to coach both men and women. Right. And you really had to look at, how are we going to build a program from scratch in a sport that's really brand new, and there's not 28,000 high schools that have women's wrestling. So let's start on the women's side. How did you go about just your plan of attack, finding talent, and what was your approach to get them excited about Ozarks?
So on the women's side, it was, I stepped into the job late last year, so that was tough to kind of build a recruiting strategy then. But I think for this year, we did a much better job. And it was some of the things that we talked about over the summer, building a depth chart, seeing where we're going to be in a few years, having a more strategic approach, definitely. And that's what I was grateful for with the women's. I could kind of start from scratch, because when you walk into a program that didn't have a strategic approach, it's tougher. So having a strategic approach, putting weight classes up on the board, and really pinpointing girls that loved wrestling. I think one nice thing about women's wrestling right now is, and coaching women, they're way more coachable than the guys. And
Agreed.
So they're way more willing to like listen and learn about wrestling. And so like we were looking for girls who loved wrestling, right? And wanted to continue it at the next level. Came from some good programs. We went out and put boots on the ground a lot, went to a lot of tournaments, had a lot of girls up on visits. And getting them excited about the Ozarks was, playing to the same tune of, hey, this is a new sport. We want to make something really good at the Ozarks. I think something that's really cool with women's wrestling, and some people view this as like a negative. I think it's great, is that it's an all one division sport right now, which I could get bogged down in the weeds and say I have no scholarships, my facilities aren't the same as division ones, but I have the same opportunity to go talk to a girl that's going to come visit my campus and then maybe fly to University of Iowa and visit their campus.
Right.
And know that we can pull in the same girls and pulling the same talent for visits has been really exciting. And I believe in our university, right? And this is where it wavers a little bit from the guys. When girls, sometimes we don't offer like a nursing major, right? So sometimes we lose a lot of the girls that way. But when we're recruiting girls, they're way more serious about academics. They're way more detail oriented. They have a plan, and if they fit the mold of what we do at the Ozarks, usually it's an easy sell, because we are invested in our students and our athletes, and I believe in our academics. I believe in our mission there. I believe in what we do. So when their plan and our plans align, it almost is like it's just like, hey, come here, just sign the paper here, because we're going to make you really good here. You're going to be really successful. And the nice part with the women is they want the big picture, right? You can sometimes throw to the guys like, hey, you can come get your degree in this and do these things. And I don't know. I mean, I know what I was like going through the recruiting process as a high school kid. So, but get them excited about the Ozarks. If they fit our mold, then it's usually pretty easy. And I think for us, it's finding a good set of girls who we can build a program around, and doing both and seeing what mistakes we made over on the other side early on. We're just like, hey, we don't have to make those mistakes again to learn, right? Like sometimes like, hey, fall, bump your head and find out, or, hey, I did that once. I don't need to make that same mistake on the women's side. So for recruiting, we kind of know what we're going after, the type of culture we want, the girls we want, and our recruiting strategies kind of reflect that. One thing that we're big on still is handwritten letters. So we handwrite letters to juniors and seniors. And some kids don't like that, right? Some kids that doesn't ping their rate, like that doesn't get them excited, right? Or, I was talking to a coaching buddy, like, hey, we're going out and we're visiting these kids and we're watching their other sporting events, right? We're going and doing home visits. We're doing all these things. And he said, I was like, I want to stop doing it because I'm not landing kids. And he's like, don't do that, because the ones you land from it are the ones that fit your culture, because you find it important. And if they find it important, that's going to be big. So we do things like that. I would say we're a little bit more of an old school approach to recruiting in that, because everyone's big on, communicating social media and we do those things. We got to, remember the times we're in, but, handwritten letters and boots on the ground has been really good for us, because the girls that respect that and value that are going to fit our culture and what we're about as coaches in a program. And that's important. Well, right, and that's the biggest thing.
They see that you're taking the time to care about them that nobody else is doing.
Yes.
It might only take you 3 minutes to write a handwritten letter, but the fact that you took it and put a stamp on it and put it in the mail, and say, hey, I care about you. Mm-hmm. I know you're not getting a lot of mail, snail mail, but I want you to get this from me. I want you to know how I'm feeling about you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's old school. I think that's, if that's not there 20 years from now, then I think something's wrong.
That's our X factor. We do really well. I mean, we're, on both sides of the house. Like, I want to make really, really good teams. Yeah. So geographically where we are, just as a Division III university, every single kid that we talk to is getting an athletic scholarship somewhere. So I gotta work, right? I gotta work and show my care, right?
Yeah. Your uniqueness is the key. Because if they're hearing, seeing the same thing from 20 other coaches, but you're going out of your way, you're going to their softball game, you're sending a handwritten letter, you remember in that phone call that grandma was sick, and you make a point of it in that letter, hope grandma's doing okay. Those things are huge for a recruit, because you're listening. Your attention to detail is really important. That's great,
that's good for us too as coaches, because I tell all our kids when we recruit them, hey, we want to care about you as people first and athletes second, right? I want to win, right? That's my job. We want to make a good program, but I got to care about them as people. And part of the recruiting process is, for me, and one thing I learned is, you got to be so genuine and upfront of who you are, the good, bad, the ugly too, right? Because they got to deal with you for 4 years, and it's not fair to lie to a kid to make them come and then they get something else for 4 years, right? It's so for me, that's been really important, being genuine and upfront during the whole process.
That's great.
Let's talk a little bit about just the overall message you would give to a recruit or parents of a recruit, what are you seeing that you wish kids and families understood about the recruiting process or the approach they took? Would you give any advice to a kid, that 16-year-old out there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One is don't take everything so personal. I just had a phone call with a coach the other day, and he's, I run these prospect camps throughout the year. And I was like, hey, I was excited to see so and so at the prospect camp. And he's like, well, he wasn't invited. I said, I don't typically invite people. It's just kind of out there. And I said, and they were kind of a little bit put off that we haven't been in super high communication with them. And I was like, hey, realize there's a lot of high school kids, right? There's a lot of high school kids, and we have very busy jobs as college coaches. And it's, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, right? So it's if you're not hearing from the college you want, or a coach you want, then reach out. I find myself really excited about kids who reach out to me, who maybe I generally wouldn't be excited about if I reached out to them first. Right. And because it's important, right? We tell our kids all the time, this is your journey, take ownership of it, right? So if you want something, if you want a college to notice you, go get noticed, right? Like there's tournaments that go on every weekend. You might have a stellar performance. I might not have just picked up on it because there's thousands of matches and there's and maybe I need to do a better job too, but it is hard. And I would say, put yourself out there. And then the second, is it kind of goes back to the caring. We're right at the end of state tournament season, right? And there's some Division I programs around the country that start recruiting our kids after they have a successful state tournament. And I say like, hey, we've been talking to you for probably 2 years now, kind of remember who's been there from jump. But what's important, and I guess where I'm getting at with that is, I tell kids this often is you want to go to a program where they want you, not where you want to be. Because that's important, right? Yes. Like that's super important. At the end of the day, I want the kids, because like there's kids who come to my program and they might not love wrestling 2 years down the road, but I want them at my university. I want them around my kids. I want them around our guys and our girls. They help out, and they, there's a class where they get credit and they can be a manager, and I sign them all up for it. You want to go to a place that wants you, right? You want to go to a place that is honest and genuine and upfront with you and cares about you when maybe you didn't win a state title, right? Or 2 years previous to that. We've got kids that we start recruiting as juniors, and we write them these handwritten letters when we see some things we like about them, and then they become really successful. And then, a bigger, shinier toy like knocks on the door their senior year halfway through, and they end up going there. And the amount of kids that I see like chase that dream that they foresee that never really comes to fruition it's a big number. And it's a lot. And that's sometimes hard for me as a coach because I care about these kids. I care about these kids, and then they go somewhere that maybe isn't the best fit. But I would say like really vetting your places and look at the things that are outside of just the athletics, right? Like, I mean, we're a good program. We can recruit kids solely based on our athletic performances, but, find the program that wants you and wants to develop you as you, and doesn't just look at you and call you when you win, but they care about what's going on at home and care about all those things, because college wrestling stops, you only get so many times with your coach, right? You want a coach that cares about you, about grades, and cares about you, about your life, and cares about your family. And I think just a lot of kids chase these things that we see in the media and the social media and want these superficial things rather than realizing like, hey, I gotta wake up every day here for the next 4 or 5 years. And do I love the place I'm at? Do I love the people that are around me? And do those people love me? And do they care about me? And do they want the best for me if I'm not starting, if I'm hurt today, if I'm out for a year with an ACL injury, if my grades plummeted to a point that nobody foresaw and I'm ineligible, does that coach still make me come to study tables? Things like that, right? And looking past the am I going to go compete and, wrestle in the Big Ten, right? Like that's cool. That's really cool. But, being at a place that is going to support you in every way possible, not just where your hands go on a high crotch, is super important.
It's such great advice, Coach. I mean, I've got about a dozen clients right now that are really struggling to send that email, pick up the phone, and call the coaches that they're interested in.
Yeah.
It's just teenage insecurity.
Yeah.
What if they don't like me? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I'm not talented enough?
Yeah.
What does it do for you? Talk about what it does for you when you get a call from a kid who sent you their film. They sent you their information. What does it do for you as a coach?
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, it's signs, right? Like I recruit based on signs, and that's a sign to me that says I won't have to. His teacher's not going to call me. His or her teacher's not going to call me in the semester because he's on top of what he needs to be on top of, right? They're all like pattern recognition and behaviors that I love. Like as a coach, I want to see kids go out of their way and be vulnerable, because that's a big part, a cornerstone of our program. Like you got to be vulnerable. At 16, 17, 18 years old, you're nervous to pick up that phone. You're right. But being vulnerable is huge. That's something we look at as a program, as us uniquely. And two, it's funny, for every kid that, calls me and says, hey, I want to wrestle for you, I probably got 10 that I call every day that don't pick up the phone or don't answer a text message. Right. And I sometimes I burn those kids out, and I get burnt out on those kids, and I'm like, hey, remove them from the list. And sometimes my assistant's like, oh, he's really good. I said, yeah, but when he's not going to class on Tuesday, how many times am I going to have to call him to get to class? That's right. So I look at all those things, like a kid who's willing to kind of step out. We probably pull in 5 or 6 kids a year who I'm like, hey, this athlete might, between the guys and the girls, probably about 5 or 6 a year, that I'm like, hey, I don't know how good they're going to be. I don't know how high their ceiling is, but man, they have not stopped. I mean, I get kids, we have some kids coming. We got 2 kids coming, and I'm so excited about these 2. They wrote me cards after they visited, like thank you cards. That's great. And I was like, wow, like that, they fit exactly what we're about, right? They're exactly what we're about. And so when I see the kids do that, because like we want our kids to be like adults, right? College wrestling, college athletics is a choice. Definitely at the Division III level, it's a choice. I want to treat them like high level athletes. I want to treat them like young adults and have them be responsible for things. And when they're showing the ability to at least try it as while they're in high school, that's exciting, right? And doing like I mean, kids who pick up the phone immediately jump to the top of our list just on character. Right. I mean, I'm like, all right, put them in the system. Let's get rolling before we know how good they are at the sport. Because again, as we prepare for regionals and nationals, like there's only 10 national champs a year. Right. And if I went 10 for 10 in the national finals, I'll probably get out of coaching, because that's an amazing feat. Right. Right. I'd never be able to recreate it. Right. But I realized how important it is to have people on my team who I can rely on, who are accountable, who are great at grades, who work really hard, and how much, and I guess I didn't realize this as a young coach, how much are high level performers in wrestling. We got 2 guys ranked top 10 in the country, and they love the kids who, they might not be great wrestlers for us, but who are reliable, who do all the right things and fit our culture. Like those kids play such an important role in our team's overall performance. When we won conference, we brought our whole team with us, because we believe that everybody plays a role and everybody does great things, no matter if you're out there wearing the singlet for us or not. And the kids who are willing in high school to call and make themselves vulnerable and put themselves out there are kids that I want to recruit, because I want kids on my team who are great people to be around, right? Great teammates, great people, and I'm not passing judgment when I say this, but probably there's somebody at home who's urging them to make that phone call. So, when you recruit, sometimes you're recruiting families too, and parents. And then I'm like, hey, that parent kind of gets it, right? They kind of get the game of recruiting, and they're pushing their kid to something uncomfortable. So when college wrestling gets hard, they're not going to call home and complain, and mom's going to say you should quit. They're going to say, hey, do this uncomfortable thing, and I know that's such a long drawn out answer to how do I feel about when kids call me, but man, it's important. I mean, that is a big step in the process.
Love it. What I'm constantly teaching is, if you reach out to Coach Barber at Ozarks, you've done 75% of the work for him. He doesn't have to find you. He doesn't have to get you excited about the Ozarks. You already are. He doesn't have to figure out how to get your schedule and your stats and your film and your coach's information, because you've already given it to him. So you've made the job of Coach Barber to recruit you so easy. It doesn't make any sense not to, or at least find out if you're capable, right?
And for sure. And on the other hand too, is like, sometimes, I see some other coaches at some like coaches conventions and stuff, and we, where we're at, like I recruit and I cross paths with a lot of coaches who recruit the same kids. And, I know how kind of they run their program. So, for a kid, let's say a girl calls and she reaches out and she's like, hey, I want nursing. I'm like, ooh, I don't have nursing, but I can now go call a coach on her behalf and be like, hey, this is somebody you'd want, right? Because again, that's something I think parents and kids don't realize is, it's funny sometimes because I'll get kids say, hey, I have a full ride to go wrestle Division I. And I just pick up the phone and I'll call my buddy who coaches there and they're like, no, that's not true. But, you see it a lot, like us coaches, there's not a lot of college wrestling coaches. So we all know each other.
Right.
And the ones who I resonate with the most really do care about the kids. So sometimes I'll build a really good relationship with a kid, or a kid will reach out to me and I'm like, you know what, maybe not the best fit here, but I'm going to connect him with other coaches who value the same things as me. And maybe that's a better fit there. And that helps too. I mean, just putting yourself out there, like, and you're right, like kind of hits a lot of the metrics that, not that I don't want to do my job, but I touched on before is there's a lot, right? So when you kind of fast track yourself in that process, you're showing me that you're willing to work for this too, right? And you're willing to do some of the, like, hit the roadblocks and pass through the roadblocks that a lot of other kids won't. And, it is hard. Like, that's the thing I said before is like, sometimes kids get upset when they don't get reached out by us. And it's not personal. It's like, sometimes you just slip through the cracks a little bit, right? And we miss on kids because of that. But the kids who call, I've never had a kid who called and I'm like regretted taking it, right? And I regretted that conversation, or I regretted that bringing that kid into the program.
I love it. I want to talk a little bit about high school coaches a little bit.
Yeah.
I spoke at the USA Wrestling Summit last year, and I got to spend 3 days with some of the top coaches in the country. And they're a different breed than basketball coaches. They're a little bit more quiet. They're a little bit harder nut to crack.
Yeah.
But the more I spent time with them, the passion and the love of their kids and the love of their sport is so intense, but more quiet. But it was just so wonderful to be around them. Do you find yourself recruiting high school coaches as much as the players? Do you find yourself going, I know this coach is going to have these kids prepared character-wise, value-wise, wrestling-wise? Do you find yourself going back to the well to some of these coaches?
Yeah, I think that is I don't know if it's good to bad or say this one, but that's probably one of the biggest things we look at. I need to know, because I'm a unique coach to wrestle for. I can be really intense at some points. And I know a lot of like our regions where we coach from, like Texas. I used to coach high school in Texas, help out there, had a club. So I know a lot of the coaches there. I know some coaches that typically just over time, you recruit the same program over and over again. And they prove to be successful. They prove not to be. So that's one. But a big one is I say, hey, like if we're not 100% sure on a kid, right, or maybe he hasn't had the success yet, or he or she hasn't had the success yet in high school, I always ask our assistants, like, hey, where's their high school at, right? Where are they going to high school? Because and then sometimes I'm like, ooh, I don't know if from that program that I'm going to be able to work with a kid like that. I'll tell you where it's the most important is on the women's side. Because women's wrestling is so young and emerging. I say young, I mean, it's there, but we're still growing as a sport. I think at the high school level, because we see it at the collegiate level, coaching at women's wrestling is really behind right now, because we just haven't had enough girls graduate through college and come back and do it. It's so young. So from the women's wrestling and recruiting there, I really look at who their coach is. For a lot of reasons, like how are they getting coached, because I want to look and say, do they get attention at their school or do they not? Do they come from a program that teaches really good fundamentals? So when they come into our room, they know what they're doing wrestling wise. Do they have a good freestyle background? But at the end of it is when I'm out at tournaments, I don't laugh in a rude way, but sometimes we'll be high on a kid and I'll watch and I'll look at how his coach coaches him in the corner and how he responds and to winning or losing, or, how many times does he look over when he's wrestling at his coach because his coach is like screaming his head off and the kid can't focus on the match? Or like, how does his coach like chew his butt if he doesn't win? And how does he interact? Because like some of it is, I'm like, man, there's a lot of like, he's got to get better at wrestling, and I got to like fix everything that he or she has with their coach, the relationship, or what they know a coach to be. So for me, like I recruit maybe more silently than anything, but I definitely, and that's a huge factor. I know kids who I get really, if I'm excited about a kid and then that I'm excited about their coach, it's a home run. If I'm, if I see kids that are on the fence and I'm not sure on them, willing to take a chance, and I know their coach and I know that, I see some things or know some things of that coach, that's a decider for me sometimes. Some people recruit parents a lot. I do that, but I think college is nice because you can get them away from their parents a little bit.
Right.
And I'm really upfront with parents on the recruiting process, but recruiting high school coaches is big for me. I think, I gotta understand what program they're coming from, because being in the South and where we are, these kids don't know wrestling like up in the North or in Iowa or New York, or where wrestling's big. Wrestling's still fairly new geographically where we are. So the coaching influence that they have is really important. So I do a lot of that. I mean, if I'm like, and I hate to sound so arrogant, but like their coach kind of has to be like one that's, I'm like, yeah, I like, and I might not like them as a people, but I like them as coaches, right? Like that's so important to me is their high school coaches.
I was the same way. If I respected the high school coach and I was in their practices and I got to see what they're being taught, there's things that I know I'm not going to have to teach that kid. They're coming in, they're going to be able to handle this. They're going to be able to handle the training, the execution. Man, it just makes your job easier. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the other side. That kid that you recruit or comes to you and says, I don't have a great relationship with my coach. They're not real engaged with helping me get to college. Without throwing their coach under the bus, I just don't feel like I'm being developed. I want to go somewhere where somebody's going to develop me. What does that do for you? What does that mean?
That's big too, because that at least shows they recognize that. Right. And then I just, as a coach and as coaches, we have to remember that every time we coach that kid. And coaching's an art, right? Like every kid needs his own way to be coached. But knowing that, and having the kid understand that is important, because I'll tell you, I definitely, messed up a few times early on when I would tell the kid that first. They'd be struggling. I say, well, I was your high school coach. He didn't do a great job doing these things. And he's like, well, I love my high school coach. And I was like, oh, I messed up. Right. And so I learned that quick. So can never come from me. But when they recognize it, it's great, because at least they're ready to take that next level of coaching, and be aware of that. And then it's just up to me to, a little bit more time in areas that they might need. Like one coach might have not taught them good fundamentals. So maybe we have some one-on-ones for fundamentals. One area that I find it the worst, like wrestling wise, that's my job, right? Like we got to make them better at wrestling. Where I find it to be problematic is in two areas: when high school coaches aren't honest with their kids and they don't push them and they tell them they're better than they are, right? I think that's everybody's problem. But two is, I had a kid once and he could not help himself but lie to me. And I was like, why are you lying to me all the time? Like, and I would never get mad, but I knew he would lie. Sometimes I would just test him on foolish things to lie about. And one day he broke and said, well, I had a coach who, if I got in trouble, his way was to like wrestle me and like beat me up in the room. And he's like, I just lie because I don't want that to happen. One thing we never do, we never like punish by, like work. Like we actually take away workouts. Like I believe in like getting better is an opportunity. So working out's an opportunity. And if you mess up, like that's a punishment, take it away. But that's always so hard, because this poor kid, unfortunately, he didn't make it. We could never build a relationship because he had no trust. Right. And that's the area, right? When you've never learned to trust a coach, the hardest one to do is your college coach, because that's your hardest part. Yeah. Right. And so if you're that would be, how do we deal with that? We just keep beating the same drum and giving the kids the same message and hope. Right. And recognize that, hey, they're going to struggle in this area. But that's the one that's been the hardest one to overcome is when they've lost faith in a coach, or they've lost faith in or an experience that really, how many kids do I bring in freshman year? I got one this year, and I like the kid a lot. And he came, he said, Coach, I'm going to try this again next year. I didn't have a great relationship with my high school coach, and I need time to unwind from that. And I was like, yeah, let's do this again next year. And I still keep in touch with him. He's working out and doing great things still. And so, but that's sad. That's tough, because I don't know what next year looks like now, because once that's damaged once and that trust is there, there's always that wall. And us, we're really unique. Our coaching staff is that we're really like close with our kids. So we almost need that, right? Maybe other coaches aren't the same way, but we almost need that level of trust with our kids. And so when that gets when that gets, you know, tested and ruined, that's hard. That's where we've had the hardest time. And that's where I say, you know, recruiting the high school coaches is really big, because my kids, when they get here, they got to know what it's like to be loved up.
Yeah.
Right. They've never felt that before. They sometimes don't like it. They don't understand it.
Yeah. But I was that kid. I felt abandoned by my high school coach.
Mhm.
So I was looking for that college coach that was going to be a surrogate father, going to be somebody that was going to nurture me. It was going to be more than just the game to them. They cared about me as a person. So I wanted a coach like you. I wanted a program like you. And there's some kids that, you know, they weren't raised that way. You know, they don't need that part of it. They want great wrestling and a degree.
Yeah.
And I that's the most rewarding when you get that kid, and then sophomore, junior year, they go, no, I didn't realize what I needed. I didn't know that I needed somebody to care about me. I didn't know that I needed that family and that brotherhood and that sisterhood. And that's pretty rewarding.
That's the only thing I can guarantee, right? I tell our recruits every single day, every single recruit visit, it's like, hey, don't go to a program that's going to guarantee you'll be successful, because I don't own that.
That's right.
I don't own the guarantee that if you come here, you'll win a national title. I can't control that. COVID taught me that. It just canceled the tournament, right? I don't control that, but I do promise them. And I said, I guarantee that I'm going to give you everything I can, and our school and our coaches will give you everything you can to be successful and love you up and give you every shot at being great. And that's, you know, that resonates with that is, you know, I'm going to guarantee that we're going to love our kids up and give them everything that they need outside of just wrestling, right? Because I can't guarantee you'll get your hand raised at the end of the day. I can guarantee that I'm going to give you my best chance, and I'm going to give you everything I can to love you up and help you through this really hard thing called college wrestling.
And right there, coach, is why you're going to build a powerhouse. And as long as you want to do this, you're going to be really successful, because at the center of your core, you're a great man, a caring father figure. You care about the person much more than their ability. And that's why I wanted to have you on, and I wanted to share you with our coaching community and the families that listen to this. And so happy that you've got a conference championship under your belt, and it's going to be the first of many, and you're getting to wrestle at the regional level, the national level, and coach at that level. So we're going to be cheering like crazy for you. Trust me.
Thank you.
Good luck. Keep me posted. Holler anytime.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks, coach. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Well, there you have it. Great conversation with Coach Vinny Barber from the University of Ozarks. And I love his passion. He cares about the kids as his number one priority. He has an unlimited bucket of energy. It just keeps refilling, and I don't know how he does it. I know I had a lot more energy when I was in my mid-20s as a college coach than I have now. But to see him work and all the balls he has up in the air, coaching two collegiate teams at the same time, and we talked about that. I just find him remarkable, and his future is so bright. It's the type of energy. If he finds that balance and he continues to find that balance, he's going to have an amazing career. Because he's just so passionate about doing everything the right way. And he's so passionate about making sure his student athletes have an unbelievable experience when he starts the process of recruiting them all the way through their graduation and beyond. And he's the type of coach, once you play for him and wrestle for him, he's going to be with you for the rest of your life when you need him. So just a really impressive human being. And I've been really thankful that I've gotten to get to know him over the past 8-9 months, and really proud of what his team is doing. And winning their first conference championship and advancing to regionals, playing, wrestling at the national tournament, just huge accomplishment for somebody that just took over this program. And it was basically a program that hadn't done much. So thank you to Coach Barber for spending an hour with me today in the middle of his national tournament run. So thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
please follow and subscribe through Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever your platform of taste is. I'd love to get your feedback. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know how you're enjoying these. I continue to have a great time. I've got a great high school coach coming up next week, and I got to coach against him this year and just walked away unbelievably impressed with his team, the program he's building. So if you're a high school coach, you're in for a treat next week, because this guy is fantastic. And I wish I didn't have to coach against him every year, but just really thankful that there's a friendship there, and I get to watch his team play and get to have a conversation with him next week. So thank you, everybody. Have a great leap year, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye.